So, Shelley Washington, I'm glad we could have a chance to talk about the work that you do and about both, which is going to have its West Coast premiere with Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. And before I get into the specifics about this particular composition, I'm wondering, what is the landscape like for composers seeking commissions today? And did the pandemic positively or negatively affect that?
Well, it is not easy. I think commissioners and ensembles want to commission composers and, shine light on them, let them write the music they want to share. But honestly, I think so much of it comes down to funding, grant writing. There's only, so much money that we're able to raise. I've had ensemble friends, do GoFundMe's or Kickstarters or have a Patreon so they're able to fund it. And classical music is a very small niche field and there are listeners, but sometimes I feel like, we all have $20 that we just keep handing back and forth to each other and, trying to do that. But it's not easy. I don't think the pandemic made it any easier. It was difficult for everyone, in a lot of respects. And I had friends who left New York, had to go home, who had to, find different routes. So I recognize how lucky I've been to have been able to keep working, keep studying, and, that people believe in me and, still like me enough to commission me, which is nice. But it's not easy out there. I know people want to commission composers, but it's the fund. I feel like the most prohibitive thing is funding, and it's hard to find that. But when it works, man, it works. It's great. Yeah.
Well, I read somewhere that commonly, institutional organizations want something more in the 10 to 12 minute zone, something shorter. And with Laco Sound Investment, that you're able to write something longer that's in the 25 to 30-minute zone. Why do you think people want shorter pieces and not allow for longer works? I mean, we sit through very long works in the concert hall on a regular basis.
That is what I told them. And at the very beginning, when, we were discussing, the commission, stipulations with LACO, but also the other commissioners, because it's a group project commission. And I said I wanted to write a larger piece. And I'm like, the funding aspect, I'm not asking for more money. I am thrilled that I am getting this opportunity, but I have so many 10 or 15-minute pieces. And this is an amazing opportunity for me to get to write something more substantial. And there's always the hesitation of, well, our audiences don't have the attention span, in parentheses, for contemporary music because they won't like it and will stop coming, which is an unspoken thing. I'm like, you are discrediting your audiences. You're not giving them the opportunity to explore, and I feel like it's undermining them. I would be offended if a conductor got on stage and was like, your tiny feeble brains are not capable of enjoying something new. Here is Brahms for the next 3 hours. And then I'm like, we love the greats. We love, the top 40 classical stuff. That's, where we came from. But also, on the flip side, when you hear complaints of, oh, there aren't young people in the concert halls, and oh, no, we're not getting new audiences. I'm like, you're not doing a lot to invite them either. So it's a bunch of different things. But I said I wanted to write a longer piece because I don't want to be an appetizer to someone else. I'm like, this is the Amplifying Voices program. I want to write something more substantial. I would like to be amplified and not be used as something for optics, where it's just like, yes, we did commission someone, good for us, and she's Black and a woman, wow, congratulations. I'm like, no, you have to go deeper than that. And I I asked for, I wanted to write a longer piece. And Leiko was like, yeah, let's do it. And I think there might have been one or two of the original commissioners that were hesitant and dropped. I'm like, well, that's very sad for them. But then another couple orchestras jumped on, and I was really happy about that. And so I have loved working with Lego, and the fact that they moved the concert, so this is their season opener, and I'm on the first half, Beethoven 9 is on the second half. Like, I feel it's like a sign of, mutual respect and trust between a commissioner and a composer. But I would just hope that going forward, institutions and ensembles who are seeking to commission composers, let the composer talk about the length and duration that they would like to write. Because sometimes I would love to write a 10-minute piece. Some composers like having, an array of very small, short pieces. But then it's limiting to our creativity when we're not given the space that we would potentially like. So I hope that continues happening. And I am very grateful to Lego for giving me the opportunity.
Well, in addition to that, it's not like you're not writing first and then getting a commission to pay for it. I mean, you never know where your muse is going to take you. I mean, and and I know it's a process of rewriting and writing and editing and things like that before you come up with a piece. So you can't it would seem to me that trying to hit a specific length, unless you're a film composer specifically attached to scenes, it seems like it would be like writing with your hands behind your back.
It is difficult. And I will say that the Aspen version of this piece and the upcoming Lego version are a little different. So I, got to have conversations with some of the performers at Aspen for like, this wasn't working for this specific instrument, or the percussionist, oh, maybe we should swap out this drum for something smaller, like those kinds of things. But also I felt, listening through, finally getting to hear it with a live orchestra, I'm like, it doesn't feel done. Like, I feel like I'm missing something. And I was like, I'm gonna add a couple minutes. I added like 5 minutes to the end, so it's about 30-ish minutes long. And I just honestly have to hope that the other orchestras are okay with that. Be like, you wanted me here, so here I am, kind of thing. But when I asked to write a longer piece, it was more of a range, and so I had known that I wanted it to be longer than 15 minutes, but I also knew 45 minutes is not within the scope of my, with the timeline and kind of how I feel about structuring music. I'm like, 30 minutes for me feels like a very comfortable amount. So I think I said like between 25, 30-ish minutes. So like a range and a goal for myself, but that's also just my writing process. And I know some composers might, get to a point where it's like you write the 15 minutes that you initially requested, but then you're like, what if I made this into an entire suite and I want it to actually be longer? Then it would have to be a continued discussion. I'm clearly biased, but if I was a commissioner, I would be thrilled that I would be able to like continue fostering their creativity and like, oh my gosh, you have written an entire suite for us. We get to play this. We get to work together instead of here's a check, go off on your own thing and then just deliver us some music and you can just like come hang for 2 days and then skedaddle. More of a actual back and forth.
Right. Well, let's talk about the work itself. In the press release, you're quoted as saying that you were inspired by the many dualities that you have and carry in your life. And I haven't heard the work yet, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity when I get to do that. But how musically do you express duality?
There are lots of broad things and also small things that the listener, they might be more secretive, exciting thing for me. But if someone were to look at a score, they'd be like, "Aha, that's a fun little trick." But I, on a really broad, general scale, I have heard the opinion of some composers or people older, not necessarily older people, but like of the old school mentality that if you're writing cute tonal music, it's not serious. It's not, as respectable as blah, blah, blah other things. So the second movement I wrote intentionally to be the cutest thing I've ever written. And there's a rhythmic thread that that begins in that movement and then actually continues on in a totally different context later on in the piece. So it's the same thing utilized differently and recontextualized. So that's a duality thing. But the rhythm for that second movement is based off of a song I sing to my dog Rodeo. It's he's a rodeo, he's a rodeo, he's the best in show, he's a little tiny puppy. And that, now that when you hear it, that's my gift to you. You will sing it hopefully the entire time. But that entire movement. It's also just the winds of the orchestra. The strings get to take a break, and that feels like a very anti-orchestral thing to do. Like, well, there aren't rules necessarily. I mean, there are things within reasons, but I'm like, giving the composer the autonomy to just, go buck wild. That's also not always an expected thing. But in like a smaller, more zoomed in thing, the recontextualization of themes is pretty present, and it spreads between all four of the movements. So the culminating of all of that in the fourth movement, there's a really fun rhythmic puzzle of 2 against 3 against 4 against 5 that's all happening at the same time, which I think might be initially, kind of uncomfortable to listen to because it's hard to grasp at where the ground is. It's kind of like this spinning thing. But then as you sit back into it, my hope for the audience is that, they're able to find their own footing within that and have the ability to listen to it in a bunch of different ways. So like me giving them an opportunity to find themselves in it is another kind of like the give and take, kind of the either or aspect of it.
Well, the fourth movement is 11:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. If I believe is the name of it. And you said we've done lovely, but we can also shred metal about that movement. And I have to say, when I think of Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, I don't think of them as an ensemble that shreds metal.
They can. I've heard it done before, and I am stoked to hear them do it again.
Well, it's funny because I don't often think of them doing that, but I also think that the films that James Dara did with them allowed them to explore a side of themselves that I think was perhaps unseemly to them, let alone, unlikely. And I'm wondering how much you think they've evolved over the last few years so that they can shred metal.
I know. So since then, of course, my relationship with them has been in the context of me getting to witness this growth, or what has been told to me as this is very different for them. So the video aspect is thrilling, and that's a huge invitation for new audiences, being like, hey, we know that you like video. What if we kind of meet in the middle with something like that? And so as part of the sound investment thing that they did the series, they asked me to curate a concert. And so earlier in the season, Derek Sky also put a concert together, and we both were like, let's host it in this brewery. So it's like you can hear all the chit chat from the other room. There's like this huge sliding door. You can go grab a beer, come and hang. They're sitting at picnic tables. But for my concert, I got to bring one of my very dear friends, Erin Santillan. She is a Chicago born, raised composer who comes out of the DIY screamo scene. So she is an incredible guitarist. The band that she's in, Masonera, is like scrams, screamo, lots of yelling, very loud, lots of really intricate rhythmic stuff. So that seeps into her chamber music in so many wonderful ways, including vocals and vocalizing and singing. And so the string quartets that Lako played, they were not just singing, but screaming and shouting these lyrics, which is not something they get to do all the time. And it was one of the most emotionally impactful performances I felt in a very long time. Seeing them, me getting to see the arc of them seeing it for the first time and being a little initially hesitant, because anyone's going to be hesitant. When was the last time you screamed for any reason, and like we're physically getting to express yourself in a means like that. But at the concert, it was very powerful. I know that they're capable of doing this, and it's very exciting seeing them explore this. So I have full confidence. I've loved getting to hear them. They're wonderful. So.
They are. I agree, and I think they'll do really, really great with it. In the process of writing both, and as you just said, rewriting, extending it a little bit. Did you uncover any new insights about yourself as a person or as a composer?
Yes, in my process historically, I do a lot of just thinking, which honestly sounds kind of lame, but it's like, I conceptualize, I gather musical intel, and it sits on the mental back burner for months and months. And then at the very end, when I'm like, I should write this down, it's this incredibly fast, intense blitz of just brain vomit onto page. And so I had a very tough spring of last year, from April, May, June. And so March is when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start actually putting down notes on the page. But then something very significant happened that was emotionally taxing, and then something else, and then something else, and then something else. And so it became, I'm very proud of myself for working through all of this, but the Lord tested me in ways that I was sad about. So I ended up, and I'm certain that people are going to hate hearing this, but I wrote all of that music in about 9 days of actually getting it down from brain to page. And I now know that I am capable of anything on the planet. There is nothing that I cannot do. I don't want to do that again, but that really pushed the limits of what I thought I was capable of doing. I'm very, very proud of myself. I like this piece a lot. And it is not something that I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna write down some fluffy stuff to get through it. No, I'm like, I really like it. I'm very proud of myself. I'm not gonna be writing a half-hour piece in 9 days ever again. God willing.
Well,
if I have to, I can. So
well, hopefully if the circumstances will be better, and thus yielding a completely different kind of piece. Yeah, well,
I really hope so.
Yeah, I know what it's like to go through tough times. So, it's good that you have that outlet that a lot of people don't, that you could express yourself through what you wrote.
Yes, very lucky.
Well, let me ask you about your upbringing a little bit, because I was very fascinated by something you told Classical Voice San Francisco, which that is that a kid that you memorized every part of your favorite Charles Mingus album. As
Yes.
somebody who loves Mingus, I need to know what album it was, and and how do you think that early passion for his work informs your approach to music today?
Ooh, question. So it was the Essential Mingus Big Band album. I think it's like 9 tracks. And I think my dad gave me this album. He's like, I think you might like it. And this is like, my father listens to like Provost Quartet, any kind of rap, any kind of rock, just all of it. He's like, you might like this. Here you go. And I was so taken by the rhythmic, melodic, how Mingus wrote for the bass, because he's a bassist, and I, as a saxophonist, primarily playing baritone saxophone, also have that mentality of from the bottom up. And so anytime I listen to music, just in general, if I really like it, if I really like this music and hyper focus on it and will listen to it obsessively for weeks or months, just over and over and over, and I don't get tired of it. This is one of those albums. I will pick out a specific instrument and memorize them one at a time until I have the full stack, which is a fun practice in orchestration. So that has deeply affected how I think about my own music. But I also have the tendency to build my music from the bottom up. So the bassists, I always give them something fun to do. That is my hope, that they have a good time. But how I structure my music actually does, a lot of it does come from listening to his big band works and his very expansive repertoire. I love it. I love all of his music.
How old were you when your father gave you that album?
Maybe 7th or 8th grade. It was when I had just started playing saxophone, really, and always had a love for jazz, but it was quite young. But that's my first remembrance of hearing an entire album and just devouring it.
Right. Well, Mingus is a great place to learn about the kind of structure you just described. The structure of the classical music world has been evolving forever, and I think it's going through more radical changes now than it has been. And people like Chris Roundtree and Wild Up, which I know you're very familiar with, and James and Yuval Sharon and others, are changing the expectations of not just what classical music can be, but how it's presented. What would you like the future to be for you and for other composers making their way through today's musical landscape? And what would you like your role in that to be?
I have really enjoyed being a participant in more of it feels like a DIY do it yourself classical adventure. So I only started being officially a composer when I moved to New York and when I started at NYU. And my year, graduate students, it just so happened that there were a lot of people in bands who played guitar. Aaron Santia, that's one of them, and Andrew Noseworthy, and phenomenal performers. So we ended up putting concerts together ourselves and writing for each other. And so that was just the expectation of classical music I had, because that was my very first core experience with it. So getting to work with these not like humongous institutions, but like Wild Up or the Desdemona Quartet or Beethoven, these smaller kind of flexible ensembles, and having performances in bars, having performances in museums or schools, just these places. It has been wonderful taking the music, whatever it is, however it is, just out into the world. I think it really affects how a first time listener will build their expectation, just like me build their expectation of what is classical music. Like, oh, it doesn't just have to be in the fancy pants orchestra hall where you know, spend $50 and you get dressed and you sit there quietly for an hour. Like, you can stand up and go to the bar and wiggle and dance at the back if you feel so moved to. And I think that's very exciting. And I love that I've had these chances to do it and will continue doing it with Wild Up. I have been working with the Long Beach Opera, and last season we did Justino, Handel's Justino, and they handed me the reins and just told me we're and in the desert, do whatever you want with it. And so I arranged it into like a disco party opera. It was very campy. I loved it, but we did it outside in a museum on this like conceptually in the round, but like a super long runway. You see it like a fashion show or something, and that was great. You know, we had 3 full houses. It was, and getting to see all the different faces. You know, there was a lot of representation of the diversity of, you know, age, race, sexuality, everything. It was fantastic. It was like, this is opera, capital O opera, outside. They're wearing lime green boots. It was fabulous, all of it. And I want to keep doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I have to say I missed it because I was getting married in New York while that was.
Valid reason to miss it. Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah. I did very much want to see it. So I hope there's another production at some point. That would be fun. Let me finish up by asking you about something that the English writer and philosopher Alan Watts said. He said, every explicit duality is an implicit unity. Do you agree with him? Which I guess you do, nodding your head.
Yes. Yeah.
But all right, I gather you agree with that. So how does that represent both you and both?
I feel like my life had a very stark divide from when I was not a composer, but loved music and was a very active participant. And when I like became composer and put the hat on and I told people I write music, they're like, oh yeah, you're a composer, but not as like oh, you wrote a little song, like a hobbyist kind of thing. I moved to New York and this life started. However, every other aspect of my life still comes into this role. Like, we are the product of our past. We are the accumulation of everything we've said or done. Our brains and our subconscious hold on to a vast majority of these things, and while we don't consciously think about them, they're still present. Even if you think, oh man, I've really changed and I would never do that again, you can't say that because we don't always consciously make the choices. Our subconscious does so much behind our backs, but it's a part of you. You know, these good things that you like about yourself, the flaws that you think you might have. For me, embracing all of these aspects of myself has been really healing, especially in the last for 3 or 4 years. I've been working with shadow working, which is like Carl Jung's concept of your shadow self, which is really digging deep and accepting things that you don't like about yourself or that other people, like whatever labels they place upon you, being like, no, you don't get to make these decisions about why I do. But I also have to accept all of these aspects of myself. So I have befriended the past parts of my life that I was like, these things have been, people have told me that they are bad. I'm like, they are not bad. They aren't, and just working through all of that. So I hope this piece doesn't give permission, but acceptance to people, that I hope that they can hear something, or at least, maybe read the program note and think, oh, it's okay. I like myself and hopefully see themselves and feel seen. That's what I would like to happen. And if not, I'm glad they came.